G-Wagon, all dependent. The garden, ride the wind. I know feet, die or not. Make you no say anything when you do, they must commend it. I can't come and keep myself. So anything when I do, I try to do on my way. I can't come and keep myself. Plenty so far we face. Just to make sure money day. But my people then go say, I know one buy, I know one die, I know one payment. I want enjoy, I want job life, I want buy motor, I want build house, I still want to know. Tell me, my nigga, what's it gon' G-Wagon, all the Bentley, the girl them, ride the whip, I know feet, die for nothing. My nigga, what's it gon' be? G-Wagon, all the Bentley, the girl them, ride the with me, I know feet. Different things them happening, schemes and packaging. In a one night for shows, I'm juggling. Flow like the ocean, my boat, I'm paddling. Sharashina fella, that's my bro, my family. Frozen trace. When it comes to money, I they concentrate. Make I tell you straight, you are not my mate. If you become mission, I be head of state. But my people then go say, I know one buy, I know one die, I know one payment. I want enjoy, I want job life, I want buy motor, I want build house, I still want to know. Tell me, my nigga, what's it gon' be? G-Wagon, all the Bentley, the girl them, ride the whip, I know feet, die for nothing. My nigga, what's it gon' be? G-Wagon, all the Bentley, the girl them, ride the whip, I know feet, die for nothing. Oh no, I now. Charge my energy, I no get time for no enemy. Tori pe pole to me. Nothing with person never see. I'm on nothing with person never see. Forget it, I say fashi. Money soon expected. Take our body, I jump. I take her to the person. Jelly, je. I'm in the answer, then yes sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes sir. Respect is reciprocal, even though una know say I special. Anybody, we no want to surgery. Anybody, we no the carry body. I can't something, I can't something. Go back to fele, I can't something. You want your bed, you never walk. Should not because myself, I never talk. I look you, they laugh, you go, I shall no say the time go come, mama, I no say the time go come. When you no go fit the line, mama, life not on python. Whether you like or not, go back to me, you basically go pass. So yeah, keep me jack on bow. Anybody, we no want to surgery. Anybody, we no the carry body. I can't something, I can't something. Go back to fele, I can't something. Money soon expected. Take our body, I jump. I take her to the person. Jelly, je. I'm in the answer, then yes sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes sir. respect is reciprocal, even though una know say I special. Anybody, when no one to surgery. Anybody, when no the carry body. Na can sentir, na can sentir. To bata fele fele, na can sentir.
Goedemiddag allemaal en welkom bij de eerste lezing van dit jaar van Stichting Comité 30 juni 1 juli Arnhem. Bij juni is Het Keti Koti maand natuurlijk en dat gaan we vandaag meemaken door de verdieping in te gaan. Met een lezing van Francio Guadeloupe over onze politieke horizon. Dus dankjewel dat je hier aanwezig bent.
Dankjewel. Ja.
En aan de andere kant zit Barbara Essenboom, voorzitter van het comité. En Arnhemse held 2021. Je mag voor geklapt worden, zeker weten. Ja, Barbara, juni is Het Keti maand wat ik net zei. En dit is jullie tweede evenement van dit jaar. Hoe voelt het zo voor jullie en ook voor je bestuur die daar natuurlijk zit, omdat wij allemaal hier weer aanwezig zijn?
Nou, ik zie dat het onderwerp leeft en het belang van het onderwerp, ja, dat steeds groter wordt en steeds meer het besef komt van dat mensen meer, en vooral de jongeren, meer willen weten over Keti Koti en wat die slavernijverleden. Want het lijkt net zoals het ver weg is, maar dat is echt Nederlandse geschiedenis waar we het over hebben. En die doorwerking, dat voelen we elke dag nog. Bewust, onbewust, of het nou impliciet dat je dingen meekrijgt of juist expliciet dingen meekrijgt. Dat beseffen we nu, dat echt iets is dat ook dat deze Nederlandse geschiedenis ook nu, vandaag de dag, effect op ons heeft.
Ja, ik denk dat we daar ook meer zo over gaan horen, over die doorwerking van Francio natuurlijk. En dit is dan het tweede evenement, de eerste lezing van dit jaar. Wat staat er nog meer op de planning?
Zaterdag hebben we nog een lezing, samen met Olivia Bitswane. En die gaat het ook over eigenaarschap hebben. Wat betekent dat voor ons nu, voor de hele maatschappij eigenlijk? Wat doen we ermee? Wat doen we met deze geschiedenis? En we hebben ook nog we gaan ook nog naar het Openluchtmuseum, het Anton de Kom tentoonstelling, en daar hebben we een rondleiding. We gaan ook met de kinderen naar de openlucht, want je weet, dit jaar is het voor het eerst Keti Koti Junior gestart.
Ja.
En ik ben daar heel enthousiast over. Gewoon de kinderen en hadden we een publiek met kinderen en al die leuke, intelligente vragen. Dat ook die kinderen, dat ze gewoon meer willen weten van het onderwerp. Ja, dat maakt me gewoon enthousiast, blij om gewoon dat geeft me motivatie om door te gaan. Ja.
Ja, was je daarvan verrast?
Nee, blij.
Blij,
Ja.
Oké, dat is mooi.
Ja.
Dus zaterdag nog een lezing en is dat ook hier en dan is het ook weer online te volgen?
Ja, de lezing is hier in Rozet.
Ja.
Ik zou iedereen aanmoedigen om gewoon te komen en vragen te stellen. En hoe meer vragen, hoe beter het is voor iedereen. Hè? Want dan kunnen we denken over het onderwerp, kunnen we dat, daar worden we bewuster. Ja.
En mogen we ook al weten wat er gepland staat voor de echte herdenking en viering? Of,
Oh, tuurlijk.
Ja?
We gaan de 30ste gaan we met z'n allen herdenken weer in het Zonswegpark. Alleen dit jaar gaan we naar de Ronde Weide. En daar is genoeg ruimte voor iedereen. Dus komen jullie met z'n allen, neem je vrienden, je familie, iedereen mee. En kom herdenken en stilstaan. En dan kunnen we 1 juli bij Theater aan de Rijn, hier aan de andere kant, kunnen we losgaan. En dan hebben we gewoon een feest. En dat je vrijheid ook kan vieren. Als je beseft wat dat is, dan vier je het ook.
Ja.
Ja, dan ga je Keti Koti vieren. Ja.
Dan gaan we het echt vieren.
Ja.
Dus jullie horen het allemaal, jullie mogen erbij zijn. Het is verder ook te zien op de social media van Keti Koti Arnhem, Stichting Comité 30 juni, 1 juli Arnhem. Of op de website staan ook alle evenementen.
ketikotiarnhem.nl.
Ja, makkelijker kan bijna niet. En wat nou als mensen die in de zaal zitten of de mensen thuis die dit zien en horen en die denken, oh, ik wil je eraan helpen. Kan dat op een manier?
Oh, weet je, ik zou zeggen, kom erbij. Als je denkt van, ik vind het leuk, ik ben geïnteresseerd in dit onderwerp, kom erbij. Er is voor iedereen wel wat te doen en we hebben voor iedereen een plekje. Ja. Keti Koti is voor iedereen. Voor iedere Arnhemmer, ook als je in Duif of Elst woont hoor. Maar
jullie zijn ook Arnhemmers.
Ja. Nijmegenaren mogen ook. Dus voor iedereen, door iedereen, met iedereen. Keti Koti is gewoon, iets van ons.
Ja. Als je dat interessant vindt, voor de mensen in de zaal, die hebben als het goed is allemaal een kaartje gekregen. Daar staan contactgegevens op. Voor de mensen thuis op de social media zijn ze altijd te bereiken. En kunnen jullie daar een e-mailadres of een private message sturen, denk ik, hè?
Ja.
Ja.
Ik kijk even naar mijn social
naar de PR,
media.
Ja, zeker weten. Mooi. Francio, Jij bent associate professor aan de Universiteit van Amsterdam van culturele antropologie. En daarna senior onderzoeker van het Koninklijk Instituut van Taal, Land en Volkenkunde.
Klopt, ja.
Dankjewel dat u hier aanwezig wil zijn vandaag. Het is de eerste keer in Arnhem, begreep ik.
Eerste keer in Arnhem. Ik vind het een mooi gebouw. En ik liep van het station hier naartoe en ik dacht, Arnhem is een levendige stad.
Ja?
Ik wist het niet. Blij hier te zijn. Ja.
Ja, en wat is uw associatie met Keti Koti?
Mijn associatie met Keti Koti. Ik ben opgegroeid op Sint Maarten, onder andere. En op Sint Maarten is 1 juli een nationale feestdag. Dus ik denk altijd van het Koninkrijk, en ik denk niet alleen maar Nederland, maar Nederland en de 6 eilanden. En op 1 van de landen binnen het Koninkrijk is het een nationale feestdag. Maar op 1 juli Keti Koti wordt eigenlijk 29 mei 1848 gevierd op Sint Maarten. En op dat moment heb je de Diamond Run. En de Diamond Run was dat de mensen die slavernij meemaakten op Sint Maarten, zij hoorden dat de Fransen slavernij hadden afgeschaft in 1848. Omdat het eiland Nederlands en Frans is, besloten die mensen, wij gaan naar de Franse kant. Op het moment dat zij naar de Franse kant gingen, waren ze vrij. En daardoor is op Sint Maarten 1848 eigenlijk de facto slavernij afgeschaft. Dus binnen het Koninkrijk heb je al een plek waar het niet 1863 was.
Ja.
En die mensen hoefden niet 10 jaar langer te werken.
Ja.
Dus dat wordt gevierd op Sint Maarten. Dat de mensen eigenlijk de hef in handen namen en richting de Franse kant gingen. En daarbij wordt ook gevierd dat door de ligging zit het ook naast de Britse en de Deense eilanden. Waardoor mensen heel vaak eigenlijk vluchten naar de Britse Cariben van 1833, daar werd het al afgeschaft,
Ja.
en de Deense Maagdeneilanden, tegenwoordig de Amerikaanse Maagdeneilanden.
Ja.
Dus we zouden misschien dat bredere idee van Keti Koti moeten vieren. En zo vier ik het. Niet alleen maar 1863, maar 1848, 1833 en 1795, toen op Curaçao de Tula-opstand plaatsvond.
Mooi is dat
Ja.
zo. Ja. En in Nederland komt het natuurlijk nu steeds meer op over het hele land. Waar het vroeger wat meer gefocust was op de Randstad, zitten we nu ook in Arnhem. In de andere delen van het land ook veel meer awareness daarover.
Ja.
Waarom denkt u dat deze aandacht voor Keti Koti steeds meer landelijk eigenlijk dekking krijgt?
Goed. Ja, dat is een goede vraag.
Ja.
Ik denk dat je in Nederland een Caribisch-Nederlandse kader begint te krijgen. Mensen die in verschillende plekken zitten in posities van macht en gezag. Op het moment dat je een kader hebt, dan wordt het makkelijker om een ervaring, een feestdag te maken. En dat is wat op dit moment gebeurt. Je vindt op de Universiteit van Amsterdam en ik denk de Hogeschool van Arnhem en overal heb je veel studenten van Caribische komaf. En je hebt in posities van gezag mensen van Caribische komaf. En die pushen het met mensen wiens voorouders al langer hier zaten, maar die ook realiseren dat het onderdeel is van de geschiedenis van het Koninkrijk.
Ja.
Ja.
En wat meer helikopterviews, zoals dat ook in Sint Maarten eigenlijk gebeurt.
Ja.
Het zou mooi zijn. Dan zou Nederland wat dat betreft nog heel veel van jullie kunnen leren. Ja, dankjewel. We gaan luisteren naar uw lezing. Non-racialism, post-racism of racial settlement. Onze politieke horizon.
Ja.
U mag plaatsnemen en wij gaan even daar zitten om ook goed te kunnen kijken. Dus dankjewel. Groot applaus alsjeblieft.
There we go. I'm going to switch to English because English is the language I feel most comfortable speaking in, and I think the Kingdom of the Netherlands consists of least of 3 formal languages. There's Dutch, there's Papiamento, at least 4. Papiamento, there's Frisian, and there's English. So I'm an English-speaking citizen of the Dutch Kingdom, and therefore I'll speak in English. And I'm an anthropologist. I'm not a historian, so I don't necessarily study slavery. I study the contemporary situation. And I felt it was important to give a talk that took an anthropological take on the whole question of reparations. In Dutch, they call it herstel and herstelbetalingen. So that's what I'm going to talk about here. Since I know academics like to speak a lot, I will limit myself to 45 minutes, and then we will have a conversation with one another. Is that fine? Yes? Okay. So let me see if this works. Oh, no. Other way around. So it's called the social question. Now, why do I call it the social question? The expression of, or slavery, or the reparations bit as an expression of the social question. And what is the social question? The social question, or what people would call in Dutch the sociale kwestie, is that people, modern people, do not think that inequality is given by God, or by gods, or by nature. They say that it's a problem and we need to solve it. That's the social question. And the question of reparations is part of that. It's an expression of that. Let's see if this works. No. I am somehow messing this up. Okay. I'm going to start, and I'm going to be using lots of Caribbean thinkers because I think it matters that people from the Caribbean have been thinking about these things, and there's a whole movement to decolonize the curriculum. I think that we should be reading Caribbean thinkers. I was in India, and at universities in Hyderabad and Mumbai, the books of C.L.R. James were being taught. C.L.R. James is a Trinidadian thinker who was busy with the social question. And he said the race question is subsidiary to the class question. So he said, what is primary? What is primary is people's position within the production order. How much you make, where do you live, how much money you have to survive. That's primary. But it doesn't mean that the question of race, racism, is not important. You have to take that question seriously as well. But for you to have solidarity across populations, it has to be, the social question has to be the question of class. I hope that's clear. And let me see if I don't mess it up. I'm going to go this route. Okay. I think the social question is part of a larger question nowadays, and I think we have to talk about that too. If I could see it this way, there we go. Why are we having this conversation about reparations? I think it has to do with three things, and it's being fed by three different developments. One development is that the Netherlands and other countries that used to be colonial powers are beginning to reckon with questions of genocide and colonial warfare. We see, I work for the Royal Institute for Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies, that there have been researchers, and one of the persons like Esther Captain or Sherto Stindi, they've written books and done studies about the colonial wars in Indonesia. A second issue is the whole question of the stolen objects in musea. What are you going to do with that? And there's a whole discussion about that, and people like Wayne Modis, who you should invite, who's heading a research center, he's a person that's doing lots of research on that. Next to those two, you have the whole movement of Black Lives Matter. So you have Black Lives Matter, you have the question of museums, you have the questions of genocide, and within that, you have the notion of reparations. So these things are feeding each other. And I wrote in Papiamento, ainda nos notei. It means we're not there yet. So the social question is still on the agenda. Inequality is still on the agenda, making sure that we live in a community of valid persons. Decent societies are still on the agenda. And decent societies only mean societies where institutions do not humiliate people, where you don't have people being treated as second-class citizens or not really belonging, these types of issues. So reparations is about that. And in the Caribbean, you've had lots of push for the notion of reparations. There needs to be a repair of what happened to these societies during slavery and after slavery. So when Prince Philip and Kate visited the Caribbean, they went to Belize. In Belize, they met the Amerindian peoples who said, you need to repair what happened. There was genocide there. They went to Jamaica, they experienced something similar. In the Bahamas, there was also talk of saying, and also the indentured laborers. All of this needs to be repaired. There we go. You're still with me? Perfect, okay. Now, in the Caribbean, and the CARICOM, which is the Caribbean community, you have a professor at the University of the West Indies, Hilary Beckles, who is actually pushing the Caribbean movement for reparations. And he says reparations is not remorse. Reparations consist of three steps. There is the step of acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge that something happened and that there is a problem. There is the matter of taking responsibility, saying, yes, I was involved in that. And there is a third point, which is a commitment to actually fix the situation. So simply saying, well, I'm sorry, doesn't necessarily work for reparations, according to Hilary Beckles. It has to consist of these three steps. Then you're busy actually tackling the social question, or an expression of the social question in the 21st century. Now, I think we need to recognize that people who experienced, or people who descend from the people who experienced slavery, express all of the human emotions that you find. So I think it is of consequence not to deal with the question of reparations only on the register of pain. I think the situation should be repaired, recognizing the common humanity of people of African descent who experienced slavery in the Caribbean. And for us, it would be Suriname and the Six Islands. Because when you think about people who experience this and people who are connected to those people, you have a particular sound. And I think that sound is about joy. And I would like to push a politics of joy in this, recognizing all of the ways people have sought to repair what was done to them and to push their humanity. So I would like to play two short clips. The first one by Burna Boy, and I understood he was in Arnhem and he gave a concert. So let's listen and enjoy at least a minute of Burna Boy.
For the game, she no pitas. I decide bad mind from a distance. Not this sweet happy, I love my pitas.
Stop that. Everyone knows Afrobeat. Everyone likes Afrobeat. And within Afrobeat, there's a sense of humanity, a sense of worth. I'm going to play another song, this time by a female artist, Nadia Bateson. So listen to this one. When you hear that music, you're hearing a form of repair. People created out of the crucible of slavery and the post-abolition forms of oppression, they said, we are human too, and we will produce music and forms of art that will fortify and strengthen us. Nowadays, this music can be heard in Arnhem and other places, and people are enjoying it. That is the silent revolution. That is politics on a lower frequency. It's not expressive politics, but it expresses itself in another way. It's transforming the people in the Caribbean, the people in Europe, the people on the African continent, and I would say globally. Let me go back. Even though this is the case, one of the things that I worry about is the way in which the life and the realities of people who were blackened, black people, how they're being reduced to questions of pain and pour me one. Whilst we know that there is an expression of all of styles of humanity within them. The question is why? And this is a sociologist, Ron Eierman. And Ron Eierman's notion is that in the 1880s, something emerged within the struggle, a new invention that actually is becoming the dominant trope in understanding and fighting for freedom. The trope is this: cultural trauma. Cultural trauma is not psychic trauma. Psychic trauma you experience. So you war and you experience it. Cultural trauma is something that goes longer than 3 generations. You can have psychic trauma for 3 generations. You can't have it longer than that. But Eierman is saying cultural trauma emerges. That's the new invention of the 1880s. And when you think about the 1880s, Ron Eierman is saying this idea emerged in the United States of America after Reconstruction. So you had a civil war in the US, and then Jim Crow was beginning to happen. And what happened was intellectuals, artists, academics, African-American academics, they developed a new idea to understand what happened to the people there. And they developed that notion of cultural trauma. So cultural trauma consists of this. So it says it's a memory, something happened which is hard to change and which threatens a society and which shows that the American, let's say the larger US was not living up to its ideals. So you will say people have cultural trauma. Now you need to remember that it's new and it has to be pushed. And we all know that when you look at media, if I watch a movie and it's really sad, I might begin to feel it. This is Eierman's point. He said they worked and they created something because it was important. He said cultural trauma is about a tear in the social fabric of a group that has some sense of cohesion. That's what cultural trauma is. But it was developed so that people who lived in Missouri, who would never see people who lived in New York, would have a sense, we are a group, we experience this together. That's the notion of cultural trauma. And when that developed, the rich diversity of expressions became reduced to one thing. Cultural trauma, people of African descent in the New World experience cultural trauma. Everyone then experiences cultural trauma. In the Netherlands, you have also people who express this. This is Glenn Helberg, who is a very intelligent psychiatrist, a public intellectual. He's someone, I think, who lectures all over the Netherlands, and I guess in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and he pushes this expression of cultural trauma. People of African descent, Afro-Caribbean, Surinamese Caribbean, they get reduced to being a black body whose history has been taken away from them. think most of you can read the Dutch expression of it. So this is a transnational idea that's traveling. And you find it all over. The question is it necessary for reparations? If you take someone like Hilary Beckles that I just showed, he doesn't even entertain the notion of cultural trauma. He says, I want reparations because I feel an indignity. That's a very different starting point for this. So why this reduction? Now, you can argue that it matters what happened because slavery was a brutal operation, a dehumanizing operation. And that operation made people who lived or who moved forcefully moved from sub-Saharan Africa to the Caribbean, it made them black. This is Achille Mbembe, a philosopher. He was at the University of Amsterdam a couple of days ago giving a talk. And his argument is, if you want to move 12 to 20 million people from one part of the globe, starting in the 1500s, to the other part of the globe, you have to make them black. They get that identity. Black meaning you have to make them means, objects. So he says blackness is invented in the 1600s. Prior to that, people who lived on that continent, in that part of sub-Saharan Africa, they weren't black. This is his Caribbean counterpart, Dimitris Judel, who says it wasn't only the 1670s, it was earlier. And it says all that diversity that you found on the continent that we later called Africa got reduced to one category. A new category emerged. Because Dimitris Judel is working with the Spanish Caribbean, he calls it El Negro, the black emerged. So therefore I say we people who were blackened, not we people who are black, we people who became blackened. In the 1600s, and if you wish, in the 1500s, that operation started. If you take it seriously, this theorizing, it says prior to people of sub-Saharan descent becoming black, there was another group of people that became black. That other group of people before people of sub-Saharan descent were the Irish. Blackness simply means the operation of making you an object and then I can treat you as I feel like. If you take Cedric Robinson, he's not on this, but he wrote a wonderful book in the 1980s, Black Marxism. So he says, I'm looking for black people. He starts in Ireland. Then he says, prior to the Irish, it's the Slavic people. And then in the 1600s, it becomes people of sub-Saharan descent. Then they become black. So blackness is an operation. It's a historical operation, it's an operation in the economy, it's an operation in museums, it's a cultural operation, it's an educational operation, because people have to develop new eyes. It makes no sense to say, even though people say that, people on the African continent sold their own people. They did not have those eyes. They did not see the way we see. Those potentates and elites, they felt we are selling other people. If you told someone in England that the Irish and you look alike in the 1300s, they would say, you're crazy. We don't look alike. Can't you see they're different? So when psychologists say people automatically see, no, people have to be socialized to see a certain thing. Therefore, the people who live, let's say, on the Gold Coast, as it used to be called, they saw many differences that people in the Caribbean or people nowadays can't see, because we developed new eyes starting in the 1600s and it continued. We can just talk about this later. It might be a point. It took a while. And again, this is someone who used to be a sociologist that was taught at various universities, and he's speaking about races within Europe. So which means that nowadays we think white, black, sometimes brown. Bouches in the 1800s is talking about internal, supposedly races in Europe that are inferior. So Europe contained a whole set of races because people had different eyes. They had to learn slowly to say there's one category, that's white. This is Kenan Malik. He says it happens internally and then it's exported. So internally within Europe, you had many different supposedly hierarchies between people that were called races, and then that gets exported. Then people slowly of African descent become black. Kenan Malik is a neurobiologist who says the notion that there is a biological idea of race is just nonsensical. You need to historicize it. How did it emerge? But when it emerges and it consolidates itself, then we develop a mental map. This is Charles Mills. He died. He was going to be the Spinoza professor at the University of Amsterdam. He speaks of white supremacy. He's saying we developed a mental map in which we think separate racial civilizations. So this is the way we look at the world. And when we see people who look like me, we say, well, we should put them back in Africa. People who look like most people in China, they're living in the Caribbean many generations, we say we should put them back into China because we think these are the mental maps we developed. There are studies at the university, the Middle East and North African studies, MENA as it's called, which studies Islam. No one says the Haitian Revolution of 1791 was actually a revolution pushed by people who actually had an Islamic background, who were practicing Muslims. So perhaps if we think about the liberal revolutions that changed the world, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution, we might have to think it differently and recognize that it's much globaler than we actually even presuppose. So again, I can put this back. What is the trick in this picture? Something that you have to be careful with. All that I've just spoken about is what was done to people of sub-Saharan African descent and their descendants in the New World. And C.L.R. James, again, his notion was you can't use these big brushes. So he says people who only see black men, you would say nowadays black men and women, being oppressed by white men and women in general don't understand anything because they can't trace the historic dialectic. To understand why we have this notion that we're all humans, you need to recognize that the people in Haiti fought and said everyone now is human. In the American Revolution, it was you still had people who were suffering under slavery. In the French Revolution, you still had these estates. It was in the Haitian Revolution, pushing these other two revolutions, that you get this notion of common humanity and you get the notion of human rights. This is why James says you need to understand it specifically and recognize that there are contingent struggles that are happening. If we look at that, we see that there are people who built on C.L.R. James, like Paul Gilroy. He was a professor at Goldsmith in London, and he developed the concept of the Black Atlantic. And he said to understand black cultures, you need to understand that they are not solely African. They are cultures that emerge in the relationship of Africa, the Americas, and Europe. To understand the unequal trade that we have globally nowadays, this is the basis, whereby you move one group of people to another place, you work them to death, or you pay them next to nothing, they develop products, you bring it back to Europe, you develop the products, and then you sell it cheaply or expensively to the rest of the world. And you destroy those economies. Gilroy is going to say, even though this was the case, you saw that the people who were experiencing this, who were working and being paid nothing, being worked to death, they developed a counterculture, a counter-formation, in which they said this struggle cannot be a national struggle. It has to be a struggle that, Gilroy's term would be outer-national. Not national, not international, outer-national. In the peripheries of different places, they were communicating with one another. This is the reason why when France was beginning to change its legislation, 1794, 1795, that the people on Curaçao heard about that. That's the outer-national. They heard it from those persons in Haiti, and then Tula revolted. And you got it across. So Gilroy is saying, do not reduce these people to only what happened to them. Recognize that they created a modern counterculture, that parts of this we inherited. This again is some authors who wrote about the Black Atlantic, and you see that the US also participated, and in the 16 or 1700s, everything is moving and everyone is moving. So when you think about culture, you need to recognize that culture is always creolized, not only in the Caribbean, but here too. If you think about potatoes, potatoes arrives from Latin America and it becomes part of the Dutch and Irish staple. If you think about West African fufu, it arrives from Latin America and it becomes part of Ghanaian food that people say is original. If you think about Italian pizzas, there are no pizzas without tomato, which was growing in Mexico. This is Gilroy's point. So all cultures are creolized cultures since the 1700s, or late 1600s. This is the world we inherited, and in that world, the social question will matter. I have some time. Are you still with me, or should I? You're still with me. Okay. The reason why you then get something which seems like uniformity within black cultures is because people are moving about. It is not so that people only move from African coast to the Americas. People were moving back and forth. The idea that people only worked on the field or in the house is a mistake. In the Caribbean, there were enough people who were working on boats. They were going up and down. They were pushing things towards Africa as well and bringing it back. This is why the sounds so similar. Let's listen to Bob Marley first.
This music you going to put up in your house. And a placard as one of the vehicles that help to free the people from this chain and bondage of oppression.
Thank you. Before I comment on that, let's listen to Miriam Makeba, singing, performing around the same time.
Kauleza. Kauleza is a South African song. It comes from the townships, locations, reservations, whichever, near the cities of South Africa, where all the black South Africans live. The children shout from the streets as they see police cars coming to raid their homes for one thing or another. They say, "Kauleza, mama," which simply means, "Hurry, mama. Please, please don't let them catch you." Kauleza, mama, kauleza, mama, kauleza, mama, kauleza, mama, kauleza, mama, sheshi sabo. Naga mapoisa zongene ndini mama, vati kauleza, mama. Naga mapoisa zongene ndini mama, vati sheshi sabo. Jonga, 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 yo kauleza, mama.
Kauleza, or redemption song. When Makeba and Bob Marley are singing, we're still in a time just coming out of colonialism. You get neo-colonialism and you have apartheid taking place. And people are connecting within the Black Atlantic. And they're influencing one another. Therefore, you can't understand Burna Boy nowadays without recognizing the influence of dancehall, hip-hop, and other musics that traveled to Nigeria, got transformed, and then you get Afrobeat. It's never culturally from one place. It's always moving about. And before people had the opportunities to read about these things in history books or in schools, Black Atlantic music, which Gilroy calls the soundtrack of globalization, was already pushing this. So as a youngster, I could listen to Bob Marley. I didn't have to get it per se in school books, and I knew something was wrong. And I heard it in the language, in languages, the Creole languages, that were said, this is not appropriate language. But in that language, you got knowledge. So we shouldn't forget that either. Now, this seems like a story of some connections or uniformities. There, Gilroy says you have to be careful, because there is no such thing as a black unity. If you take the notion of reparations that we're talking about today, countries like Ghana and Nigeria are not signing up for reparations. The Caribbean countries are pushing for reparations. There's some pushes for reparations in the United States of America, but those larger countries are not signing up. This is why Gilroy says it's not international, it's outernational, it's peripheries meeting one another. When you take the distinctions between the reparations, the CARICOM's reparation is not solely reparations for what happened during slavery. It's reparations also for the Amerindian peoples, because genocide took place. There's a conversation now within the CARICOM, the Caribbean community, to say it has to be for slavery, it has to be for the genocide of the Amerindians, and it has to be for the indentured. The people of China, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, the Near East, who also came to the Caribbean, who also suffered. So the notion of reparation becomes a broader thing. And Beckles would say, we have to also consider those people that have remained poor who are of Irish descent. In the Caribbean, they're called the Redlegs. So if you take a wider Caribbean perspective, then you have to say, if we're talking about reparations, and you only focus on the people of African descent, you still have to ask yourself, who are we talking about? And don't presuppose you know who you're talking about. Sylvia Wynter and people like Edouard Glissant are scholars who have been busy thinking about this. In the Netherlands, you have someone like Quincy Gario, which I think is a very smart and intelligent man, and he pushes under the radar certain ideas that don't become clear enough. In the Caribbean, you always had three positions in the discussion. The people who came from Africa were slaves. People still use the term. Some people get angry about that and they say, no, it is the enslaved, influenced by much of North American discourse. In the Netherlands, you see the terms slaaf en tot slaaf gemaakt. But in the Caribbean, there's always been a third position. Different names for the people. They could be called the catibus, papiamento for those that were captured. They could be called the arrivants. You descend from the people who arrived. They could be called the survivors. You descend from the people who survived the furnace. That's a different position. So you don't call yourself slave or enslaved. You call yourself another term. And why is this? Because Jean Casimir, a Haitian scholar, says we have to be careful with that. As he says, our mothers did not give birth to slaves or to enslaved people. They gave birth to human beings, even whilst they were experiencing slavery. And in giving birth to human beings, they were passing on a tradition of saying, we can never accept this. This is why it was broken. This is why the terms slave and enslaved, for many people in the Caribbean, are not the appropriate terms. They would say, I descend from the catibus, or I descend from the arrivants. And then you have a different discussion. And those three positions are still there, and there's a discussion in the three positions. I'm coming to the end. If you say you are descended from the survivors or the arrivants, then you've opened up the situation in which you can connect with other people that also experience oppression and who also refuse the labels. And therefore we have to be careful with the labels. I'm coming close to the end, about 2 or 3 slides. You're still there? Yeah? Okay. This is Edouard Glissant, another scholar from Martinique, died, and you see people in India that are pushing this. Ananya Kabir, who's here right now, or she's in Leiden doing a fellowship, and Ari Gauthier. And they're saying, when we think about India, we have to be inspired by theories of creolization. And we have to be inspired by the intour of Glissant. What is this notion of opacité, which is tied to creolization? Glissant would say, don't reduce me to any of the categories that emerged during colonialism. You have to respect my opacité. You can never know me. There are parts of me that I can't even know. And when I'm speaking to you about injustice, I'm not going to reduce you either to a category, but I'm going to speak about injustice. And therefore, we have to respect each other's opacité. And Glissant's point was, I'm not going to dwell on black objecthood, what was done. I'm going to dwell on what people did together, how they constructed other ways of living that now are influencing the rest of the world. Therefore, in India, when Ananya Kabir and these push, they say, let's focus not on India as caste system. Let's recognize that there was also creolization, and let's push creolization to rethink India and push a wider struggle that would be across caste positions. Another term is this intour, and therefore I say the social question is part of a broader question. The intour for him, the everything, or the tout le monde, if you speak French Creole, would mean you don't make the distinctions between nature and culture for Glissant. When you're fighting for the social question, you're also fighting to make sure that the question of the environment, what is called the Anthropocene, is part of it. So you're remaking the world in a way that respects all the expressions of life. And humans are one of the expressions of life, not the only one. Last slide. You have Nandita Sharma, who's at the University of, I think she's in the middle. Yeah, correct. She's at the University of Hawaii. You have Rachel Gillett, who's above. She's at Utrecht University from New Zealand. And they're working with the ideas of a Jamaican scholar, Sylvia Winter, and the notion of the New World. And this is Sharma. The New World, and I come back to that, is not only the Americas, as it's usually taught. The New World is the world that emerged when slavery was taking place, when the indentured was taking place, when things were changing. We now live in a world in which we can never say, I don't recognize that other person as a human being anymore. We don't live in a world in which we can say, that is culturally so strange to me. That's the new world. And based upon that, Sharma, Rachel Gillett, pushing the idea of Sylvia Wynter says, it has to be a struggle that is transversal, that is about the common. So which means the question of reparations, and I'm going to end, the question of reparations being an expression of the social question, is something that matters to all people. It's not something that only people of African descent or people who experienced the genocide as the Amerindians or people who experienced indentured labor, but it's also people whose ancestors were here. It matters to them too because it's about recreating the world that we inherited together. Every time you eat the potato, you're eating that history. I'm going to stop there. Thanks.
Dankjewel. Zijn er vragen vanuit het publiek? We gaan voor de vragen, krijg ik net hoor, gaan we eerst luisteren naar Mami Joseph. Zij is singer-songwriter, schrijfster van een kinderboek, Sprookje Prinses Mama. En ze gaat een zelfgeschreven lied voor ons zingen, Ready for Change. Hartelijk applaus voor Mami.
Black mothers who cried out for the loss of their sons and daughters did not give birth to slaves. Correct? Correct. Dit volgende lied, wat ik zal spelen, dat heet Ready for Change. En ik heb het geschreven 2 jaar geleden, naar aanleiding van wat gebeurde met George Floyd, wat de hele wereld heeft gezien. Ik schreef het en ik zong het met mijn dochter en we kregen hele kwaadaardige reacties. Hij is niet aan, hè? Ja, nu is hij aan. Heeft u het kunnen verstaan wat ik zei? Ja. Oké, gelukkig. We kregen kwaadaardige, nare reacties. Terwijl het een lied is van liefde en verbinding vanuit een moederhart. En ik ben heel dankbaar om vandaag te kunnen spelen in een ruimte vol mensen die bereid zijn om zichzelf te onderwijzen in de geschiedenis die ons allemaal aangaat. Of je kinderen hebt of niet, we zijn allemaal kinderen. Dit is Ready for Change. En dank je wel. You may be having a daughter, you may be having a son. Will you like what you done with the place? Well, they know we're all one. I hear you saying it's not my fault, and I'm not taking the blame. Is there anyone else I can call? Somebody ready for change, 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 change. Somebody ready for change. You may be in a divorce now, fighting disease in your veins. Maybe hurting like no one's business. Yes, I can feel your pain. I hear you saying it's not my fault, and I'm not taking the blame. Is there anyone else I can call? Somebody ready for change, 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 change. Somebody ready for change. Somebody ready for change.
Somebody ready for change. Somebody ready for change. Oh, I'm watching, I'm waiting, I'm ready for change. But nothing will happen. I sit here in shame. Can anyone hear me? Dare I use my voice? We're all in chains until we change. We're all in chains. We're all in chains. You may be in a divorce now, fighting disease in your veins. You may be hurting like no one's business. Yes, I can feel your pain. Hear you saying it's not my fault, not my fault. Is there anyone else I can call? Is there anyone else I can call? I'm watching, I'm waiting, I'm ready for change. But nothing will happen. I sit here in shame. Can anyone hear me? Dare I use my voice? We're all in chains until we change. 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 We're all in chains. We're all in chains until we change. We're all in chains. We're all in chains.
Dankjewel.
Wat een prachtig lied. Wat heb je dat prachtig gedaan. Dankjewel, Mami.
Heel graag gedaan.
Terwijl langzaam terugloopt, hoop ik dat iedereen zijn vragen heeft opgeschreven. Voor Francio of Barbara. Zijn er vragen vanuit het publiek? Ja, de microfoon komt naar u toe.
Dankjewel. Is het oké als ik de vraag in het Nederlands stel?
Ja.
Oké, goed. In je titel staat het woordje reparatie, reparations. Je hebt net ook opgenoemd 3 factoren die eigenlijk geldig zijn om te kunnen spreken van reparatie. Maar toch zie ik dat in de maatschappelijke discussie die hieromtrent ontstaat, er vaak ook gekeken wordt naar financiële reparatie. Wat is jouw visie en blik daarop?
Goed. Als je de 3 componenten neemt, als ik pak wat de CARICOM pusht, wat Beckles pusht, is het niet financiële reparatie als dat mensen een zak met geld krijgen. Het gaat om hoe zorg je ervoor dat er eerlijk handel is. Hoe zorg je ervoor dat er vormen van ontwikkeling zijn waardoor mensen in die samenlevingen ook mee kunnen komen. Dus het is een pakket en het gaat niet om een financiële genoegdoening voor een individu. Het gaat om een samenleving. En in die samenlevingen heb je een brede diversiteit. Iemand dat ik niet heb genoemd daar is Ralph Gonsalves, de minister-president van St. Vincent. Zijn voorouders kwamen uit Madeira als indentured laborers. Hij pusht ook reparations, maar het gaat reparations voor heel St. Vincent en de Grenadines. Ja.
Ja. Mevrouw in het midden.
I'm very, 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 very happy that you have given a wide range of the concept of reparation and not even mention the financial point of view, because that's something that we are hearing the whole time, why it's such a broad thing and complex. So my question is, how can we, how can I put it like, and stay nice, how can we help each other to see it in a broadened way and not only in the financial, from the financial point of view?
Good question. Look, I think we all have domains where we operate. The domain where I primarily operate is in university settings, and once in a while in settings such as this one. There is a financial component to reparations. If you're going to actually repair past wrongs, there will be a financial part of it, for sure. But that financial part is so that you can create a commonwealth of decent society, so that everywhere a person lives, they live in societies where they can develop themselves. I think like what is taking place here with the Comité of Arnhem, NGOs like that matter because they're pushing this. I think we need to have more conversations with each other, because I think that the question of the Anthropocene, the climate change is also part of it. I think that environmental NGOs and people who think about that have to also be part of that conversation to make it a broader palette. Because what people forget when they talk about slavery is the amount of wood that was burned. That was a form of deforestation. The term factory was first used for the plantations in the New World. It wasn't used for the industry that later emerged in England, because it was burning of coal so that you could develop and you would have these large. So therefore I think that across the board, and you have public intellectuals that are doing all kinds of things, I think they have to be part of it. And there are going to be moments in which we will have differing views on the matter. That's fine. But it's about that larger goal that I think unites us all in this. And therefore, I would say that in all the domains where we operate, you have to be pushing this as much as possible, and you have to have the conversations with each other. I said I can't speak about history. I know there are people like Alex van Ciprian and so forth. They are the historians. We also have, I think, as academics, we have to be careful with hubris, not saying, I can understand. No, I didn't do the archival work. I can't speak about that. I can speak about the anthropological take. And like I think Alex or Gert, they can speak about the historical take. And I think all of these together create a much richer picture of what was happening and how one can deal with this. Economists can talk about how you now institute this, if you're going to institute it.
The magic works together.
Yeah, correct. Correct, yeah.
Everybody is striving their own goals, fighting their own fights in their own corners. And that's what, sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional about it, yeah. But that's what is not leading us, and by us I don't only mean like black people, but all of us, yeah, to another step and another step. Yeah. And you put it in Papiamento. I grown up on Curaçao till my 18th birthday, and I always heard un pueblo na camina, yeah. Een volk onderweg. Yeah. And we are still walking, and we are still walking.
Correct, correct. Bob Marley said, Lord, I got to keep on moving. Movement, because we're not there yet. So we're moving, and we're trying to institute this. Yeah. So the new world is still to come. It emerged, but for it to really be a new world, we have to do that work. Ja.
Dankjewel. Oh, nou, is er nog een andere vraag vanuit het publiek? Mag ook in het Nederlands, als je daarbij comfortabeler voelt.
Allereerst dankjewel voor je verhaal. Interessant. En ook zo interessant vanuit een vooral veelal Caribisch perspectief. Ik zit ik weet niet, 2 vragen, of misschien is het dezelfde vraag hoor. Je hebt iets gezegd over blackness, no? Dat mensen zwart werden gemaakt, dat bestond niet. En toen heb je ook iets gezegd over de termen slave, enslaved en katibu. En dat verschil van slave en enslaved en katibu, die pak ik nog niet. Het lijkt alsof het een soort van kracht in zit, hè? Van je bent geen slaaf, je bent ook niet als slaaf gemaakt, je bent gepakt of zoiets katibu. Kan je daar nog iets over zeggen?
Good. Een slaaf is een ding. Het is menselijk vee, chattel. Je kan zeggen tot slaaf gemaakt en dan kun je zeggen mensen die tot menselijk vee zijn gemaakt. Of die object zijn gemaakt. Katibu betekent zij die gevangen zijn. En het moment dat je gevangen bent, is het moment dat je strijdt om weer vrij te komen. Daarom is katibu een interessante term. Want het is van het Portugees, richting papiamento. Waardoor het dan de term wordt van de mensen die eigenlijk strijden om vrij te komen. De term arrivant in het Frans is, we zijn aangekomen. En dan maak je een wereld. De Caribische samenlevingen. Maar dat betekent dat je in ieder geval vanuit een andere positie denkt. En dan zeg je, ja, er zijn momenten waarin slavernij was mensonerend en heel veel mensen zijn doodgegaan en er was onderdrukking. Maar geen enkele mens accepteert dat hij object is. Op allerlei manieren vecht men ertegen. Dat is wat een katibu is. En dan, heel kort, en dan waarom ik dat woord Keti Koti heel mooi vind, is dat het gaat om een moment van viering. En pijn en joy zijn dicht bij elkaar. Het zijn beide non-ordinary emotions. Je gaat door de pijn richting joy en vanuit joy vecht je. Het moet nog beter. Want je hebt een gevoel van waarde. That's why Keti Koti, denk ik, is voor mij een prachtige term.
Ja. En ik vraag me dan af, want we hebben nu een term uit het Portugees en uit het Frans. Zou er ook zo'n term zoals katibu in het Nederlands of Engels moeten komen? Of bestaat er zo'n term waar ik misschien niet vanaf weet?
Dat weet ik niet. Er zullen misschien als mensen heel goed, mensen die dat hebben onderzocht, dus nogmaals de mensen zoals Bruno Jones en Esther Captain en Oost-Indië en van Cypriaan enzovoorts komen van Galen. Misschien dat er ook in het Sranantongo een soort gelijke term bestond en bestaat. Minder gebruikt, maar ook zo'n term dat eigenlijk gaat vanuit de agency van mensen. Survivors, arrivants, praat over agency. Praat niet over wat er met hen is gedaan. Maar dat weet ik niet, omdat ik geen Sranantongo spreek en ik ben niet... Oké, voilà. Ja.
Ook katibu.
Ja.
Ja. Vind ik mooi. Zijn er nog andere vragen? Oh, daar voorin.
Waar ik zo benieuwd naar ben, en ik weet niet of u daar ook antwoord op kunt en wilt geven, is maar als u het heeft over reparaties en herstel, wat zou de Nederlandse politiek op dit moment daarin kunnen en moeten doen?
Goeie. En ik heb er geen moeite om daarover te praten. Ik denk dat de Nederlandse overheid, en nogmaals, het gaat om de Nederlandse overheid of het gaat om instituties die door de tijd heen zijn blijven bestaan. Dus de Nederlandse overheid bestond in die tijd en het bestaat nou. Die zouden excuses moeten aanbieden, die zouden fondsen in het leven moeten roepen om in ieder geval een betere relatie met Suriname, waardoor kwesties van ontwikkeling, want daar wonen mensen die dat hebben meegemaakt. Als het gaat om Nederland, puur sec, het gaat om het uitbouwen van de civiele, politieke en rechten van mensen van komaf. Dus dat betekent dat je ondersteunt allerlei initiatieven zoals het initiatief hier. Als het gaat om het bredere koninkrijk zoals het nu bestaat, dat betekent dat je ook allerlei vormen van reparatie moet doen binnen het koninkrijk met de eilanden. Dus alle drie. De diaspora, initiatieven die er al zijn, want mensen zijn dingen aan het doen. Hoe versterk je dat? Hoe zorg je ervoor dat mensen al die kansen krijgen? En dingen zoals racisme en zo, dat moet je keihard aanpakken. In relatie tot Suriname, hoe onderhoud je een relatie waardoor je de ondersteuning geeft in dat ontwikkeling en idem dito op gelijkwaardig voet met de BES en de KAS-eilanden.
Nog een vraag? Ja.
Nou, en daarop aanvullend, helpt het dan dat de burgemeesters van Amsterdam en Rotterdam excuses aanbieden en dat misschien de premier dat volgend jaar ook gaat doen?
Ik denk zeer zeker dat het helpt en het is belangrijk dat Abu Talib het heeft gedaan en Femke Halsema. Ik denk dat het Koningshuis het ook moet doen en de premier Rutte zal het dan zijn. En dat daarbij gaat het ook om het bestendigen daarvan met allerlei soort beleid. Dus daarom zegt Hilary Beckles, just simply saying I'm sorry, remorse is not enough. Het gaat ook om een commitment to repair. Dat zit er ook bij.
Is it also something to do about awareness, and how do you bring about awareness to people that are in the system and are still moving in the ways as you described?
Yeah. I think it is about raising consciousness and awareness, and I think that schools in the primary, secondary have an important role to play. I think universities, but I think NGOs and wider community organizations play a vital role. I think it would be quite something to push this in neighborhoods. I think it's important when people talk about Western values like the freedom of expression and the freedom of religion and so forth, that one always makes the reminder by saying, but this developed also because people fought against slavery. Because some forms of religion weren't considered religion, and people also, some forms of expression were not considered expression, and people had to fight for that. So women's rights, after the Haitian Revolution, the women said, it's fine, but I want equal rights. You get a women's revolution in the 1800s too. So, yeah.
I was in a political party pushing for more awareness, but one of the things I came to realize as growing more conscious and aware by myself is that when you put a group of people together who are fighting for more awareness, things can happen as to different ways of dealing with the cultural traumas if one isn't aware of their own biases and, opinions and everything. So I found it very difficult from my own awareness to create a common sense where we could do it together. So what I see of what I experienced is that people often, from the cultural traumas and everything that's been created, as you explained in your lecture, that it's difficult to find a common ground as to where to start if there are different ways of being aware and conscious of one's individual journey.
Yeah.
So how do you create a bridge between the knowledge of your own, the growth of your own individual consciousness, and wanting to make someone else aware in, finding a common goal?
Yeah. Good one. Look, it's always going to be hard work, there's going to be lots of misunderstandings and so forth that happens during that. My position is always, let's make it concrete. For instance, if there are issues in Arnhem right now, whereby what is called the social minima are struggling, and generally speaking in the social minima you have lots of people whose parents or grandparents came. No. You struggle to actually make sure that those people have a dignified life. The moment you're struggling for that, and these people might be of Surinamese descent, but some of them are also of Moroccan, Turkish descent. Many of them, I'm sure, are people whose ancestors were here longer. Once you're struggling for something like that together, it creates a bond. And then they recognize, oh yeah, because we're in this together right now. Those who are not experiencing the minima, they too should say, it is not acceptable that people in the Netherlands currently face this. And when I think about the people who are now asylum seekers or refugees, I think that's an issue that people can rally around to say, if this is a decent society, and I want to live in a decent society, if you treat people that way, and I allow that, it won't take long before you think you can also do it to people who have citizenship. So therefore you must stop it now, immediately. Then you're working on concrete matters which creates a common. Ja.
Allereerst dank u wel voor de lezing. De vorige 2 vragen die gingen over awareness, over bewustwording. Vandaag las ik een mail met een oproep om op 1 juli vrij te nemen. Als een soort van oproep om van 1 juli een nationale feestdag te maken. Dat zal ongetwijfeld ook leiden tot meer bewustwording. Maar hoe staat u er tegenover? Moet Keti Koti een nationale feestdag worden? Of druist dat misschien juist wel tegen iets in? Want dan komt het weer van de Nederlandse overheid. Maar hoe staat u daarin?
Since you're the committee person, ik denk dat jij dat beter kan beantwoorden.
Ik sta er helemaal achter. Ik denk dat 1 juli een nationale feestdag moet worden. Maar bovenal dat we daar ook meer tijd en aandacht in moeten steken. Als we het hebben over onderwijs, primair, voortgezet. En ik wou dat eigenlijk aan jou vragen van, hoe zit het met een vakgroep die dit alles, al die specialiteiten die hierover gaan. We hebben het over Nederlandse geschiedenis en het gaat over decades, over eeuwen. Wat vind je ervan? Want het wordt versnipperd overal een beetje gedaan, een beetje Nijmegen. Nu hoor ik dat er in Wageningen ook iets gaat gebeuren op academisch vlak. En in Amsterdam natuurlijk gebeurt het al. Wanneer komt het? Is het noodzakelijk dat het allemaal bij elkaar komt in één gebouw, als één discipline naar boven komt? Je hebt het in Amerika wel, maar wat vindt u ervan?
Een soort nieuwe studie.
Een nieuwe studie.
Ja.
Ik denk dat er mensen zijn, Saudi, Zandvliet, die pusht volgens mij iets als Afro-Nederlandse studies of zo. Ik denk, goed, een vakgebied. Ik doe antropologie, ik zal niet Afro-Nederlandse studies doen. Ik doe antropologie, ik denk dat mensen geschiedenis doen. We moeten met elkaar kunnen praten daarover. Ik denk dat het goed is als we zorgen dat we steeds vertalen. Cultuur is uiteindelijk voor mij vertalen. Steeds vertalen van de een naar de andere. Kritisch vertalen van de een naar de ander. Ik zou zeggen niet Afro-Nederlandse studies, maar Afro-Caribische studies, Afro-Nederlandse studies, Caribische Nederland en de whole mix of verschillende dingen die je zou moeten hebben. En nogmaals, altijd koppelen aan concrete vraagstukken en noden waar mensen bezig zijn. Ik doe Anthropologies of Black Atlantic, dat is een cursus dat ik geef aan de Universiteit van Amsterdam. Een aantal van die cursussen vindt plaats in Amsterdam Zuidoost bij Radio Mart, het Surinaamse radiostation. Daar komen de studenten, het zijn voornamelijk internationale studenten. En dan hebben ze een relatie met mensen in de wijk. En dan heb je mogelijkheden voor koppelingen voor issues die een rol spelen, waarin zij misschien ook kunnen assisteren daarin. Dus die koppelingen moet je volgens mij steeds maken. Want het moet altijd gaan over, of tenminste voor mij, academische studies moeten een relatie op een of andere manier onderhouden met wat er al gaande is. En dat proberen te verstevigen. Niet hetzelfde worden, because that's not possible. Maar het verstevigen en ergens een kritische blik steeds onderhouden met dat soort vragen. Ja.
Ja.
Of acties, als je het zegt. Ja.
Dankjewel.
Zijn er nog vragen vanuit het publiek? Dus dan lijkt dit mij een mooi moment om het zo af te sluiten. Dank u wel voor uw komst en de lezing.
Ja.
Dank je wel, Mami, voor het mooie optreden. En dank je wel, Barbara, voor de hele bijeenkomst en het bestuur. En Rozet, dank je wel voor het mogelijk maken, voor alle techniek en de locatie natuurlijk. En natuurlijk iedereen in de zaal en de mensen thuis. Dank je wel voor jullie komst en voor het meekijken, jullie deelname. En hopelijk zien we jullie zaterdag weer.
Ja. Nice.
Killer.